Welcome back. I hope this weekend you were able to spend a little time continuing to reflect on everything that you learned last week and all the reflections and conversations you had with other participants at Migration Justice. I also hope that before you watch this video, you took some time to reflect and kind of ground yourself after listening to the videos or the stories actually of asylum seekers at the border. In this video, I'm gonna do my best to try to teach you about organizing on your campus. And we've actually, in the last week, we've talked many different versions. There have been many words like power mapping, different campaigns, coalition building, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about that with you all, and kind of share the knowledge that I have from the years I've spent organizing. Before we move on, I want to share three things, kind of three top line things that I hope you can at least take out of this video. The one, I can't teach you organizing in this 30-minute video. That's impossible. But what I hope to teach you at least is to scratch the surface of what you will learn in terms of organizing. But I also feel that the best way to go out and to organize is for you actually doing the work. And that's why I always kind of stay away from stuff like organizing 101, because organizing, it's very different, and a lot of times even experienced organizers learn how to organize in a different way, a different style, depending on who the community, the environment that you are in, and the issues that you're working for. The second thing that I really want you to take out of this is organizing is about empowering people. It's about empowering yourself, empowering the people who are directly affected, and empowering the people that are organizing with you. We must always stay away from this idea of victimhood or narrative of victimhood, because there's no power into that. And I also want, there's a very difference from sharing the struggles that a community is facing from just saying, feel bad for them and change it. Our organizing is going to be, feel bad for undocumented folks and we should change the law. Our organizing about, look at the strength and the power that this community has, and look at how much they will bring to our society. The skills, the knowledge, the experience that we cannot teach as a society to one another because we never experience the struggles that they have. And also reminding that, especially for you all at a Catholic university, is reminding them that our values are about seeking justice and ensuring that we live in a just world. So it's not about feel bad, we have to give them all these resources. We have to ensure that everyone is receiving justice. Whether you are a white student, you are a black student, you are an undocumented student. Everyone will receive the justice that they need. So again, organizing is about empowering each other. Last thing, third thing, which I think this is something that's very out of me, and I always tell a lot of folks, especially those who've spent a year organizing with me, you learn much more from failing than from succeeding. And that's also a good life lesson. Because because remember how I said that stay away from these organizing 101 type stuff? When you go into a new situation, when you go to a new environment, when you go to a new school, you have to understand what you're going into. You have to understand the culture. And so organizing methods have to be tweaked and changed all the time. And a lot of times, some of that will fail. And you will fail in many occasions because it takes time for you to understand the culture, understand the community. Uh, and even if you've been in that place for a long time, I've had when I was organizing in Cincinnati, Ohio, there was a lot of times where I had to relearn what my community was facing, even though I grew up in that community. So it's the same with you and your university. You still have to understand and learn, and because there's also so many cultures that are at play, and with all of that, all of these variables, you're gonna fail sometimes, and that's okay. And welcome that. Welcome the possibility of, okay, we might not get this. But what you want to work, the beauty of the failure is what you learned out of it. And that knowledge, that is so precious and valuable, especially because you then can teach that to the next generation. You can teach that to a freshman, to a sophomore, or to um, any other kind of incoming students, grade levels that want to continue the work, especially when you leave on. Last Tuesday, when we were when during the alumni panel, Charlie talked about this. Charlie talked about how his work and the many things that went wrong that he learned from it, that he was able to teach to the students that are still going to be at Loyola, Maryland, and that will continue the work that he has started. So remember, learn from your failures. All right? So before we move on, I want to share a little bit about my organizing experience, my organizing journey. So you can get a sense that it's different for everyone else. And so also you can know my organizing style and I how as an organizer I was brought up. My mom was an organizer. Fast forwarding, you know, we arrived to the U.S. At the age of 8. My father walked out on me, my mom, and my two little sisters. My mom was a single mother, undocumented, couldn't speak English, couldn't drive. So she she did her best to find a home for us, and the home we were able to find was in the neighborhood I grew up in, Evanston, Cincinnati, Ohio. And at that time, it was a very tough neighborhood. There was a lot of struggles that that we and other our neighbors faced. So my mom knew that it would have been hard for her to take us out of that neighborhood, and that she, well, my mom. One thing you need to know about my mom is she was a fighter. All right, and so my mom did not easily give up on anything. And so she wanted to work to create a better community in Evanston. So she started organizing. She started fighting for the injustices that we're facing. And one of the things that she did was she worked with undocumented workers and ensured that their rights were being met and that they were being paid an equal that they were getting paid accurately. And in the midst of her organizing, she met a bunch of friends. One of them was my dear friend Don Sherman, who has been like a father figure to me and kind of my organizing father, I would say. I've learned so much from Don, and within them they started the Cincinnati Interfaith Worker Center that still exists today and continues to live out their work of ensuring that undocumented workers and any worker in general uh, knows their rights and they're they're being paid a living wage. Through watching my mom organize as a kid, I eventually started to organize myself, and it all started with Don tricking me into one day sharing my story. I don't recommend that, but it was one manner how he got me into it. And because of that, I started sharing my story a lot more. And at the same time, things were happening. A lot of energy was happening around the Dream Act. I was a perfect qualification of the Dream Act. So I continued to organize with other organizers in Cincinnati on different rallies, educational events, helping um, the, the Cincinnati community, people in Cincinnati, understand what was the Dream Act, who was affecting, and hear the stories of dreamers, right? And so I started helping out in all of those different events, sharing my story more and more. And eventually I found myself in front of a group called Yes, Youth Educating Society. And at the time when I started, what we went is we just went out to different schools, to different parishes, and we just shared stories and educated people on our broken immigration system, on the Dream Act. When I started college, Yes was kind of, it was slowly going away. There was no membership. We didn't have any annual meetings. And long story short, really long story short, I found myself um, being employed by the Intercommunity Justice and Peace Center, which was an organization that Yes was under and operated with Yes. And they asked me to work to restart the Yes program to and to continue organizing in the with Yes members and in the city of Cincinnati on immigration issues, on DACA. That was, to me, the first real test I've had of organizing multiple campaigns, organizing a group, organizing members, and helping them to educate them on organizing and giving them opportunity to keep pushing in the universities. What Yes, to talk a little bit about Yes, it was a group of high school and college age students from all different universities and high schools in the greater Cincinnati area. And we would start with organizing our own campuses on how to make our campuses more welcoming towards immigrant students, while at the same time, depending on the campus and depending on how many immigrant students were there, um, for a school like mine, Xavier, we focused more on advocacy and how to get students to advocate um, for good pro-immigration policy. I did that for about 3 years. We started with no membership, and by the time I graduated college and left, we had over a thousand members, 50 active members, and I believe maybe 10 board members. Um, Yes has a special heart for me, and that's where I've failed many times, learned from my failures. But that's really where I started having more conversations with my mom, and I started to realize what, for me, my organizing style is. And it's very reflective of my mom. My mom always talked about that leading by story, leading by the stories we share, and how those stories empower ourselves, empower the people around us, and allow for people to step into our shoes and to see the world the way we have been living it our entire life. That in that manner of organizing, that we can accomplish anything. My in the last organizing video, when during the advocacy in 2020, I talked about how storytelling is my bread and butter. It still is, and that's because for me, that's how I organize. I'm always organizing on the idea of how do we share our story. Now, that could be me sharing my story like I did about my journey of organizing, or that could be sharing the story of the world we want to see, helping to articulate, to allow people to imagine what a just world would look like, what a welcoming campus for undocumented students would look like. What would a campus that all of its students advocate for pro-immigration policy that would begin to address our broken immigration system and ensure that every undocumented person, asylum seeker, DAC recipient, TPS student, mixed status family, is seen with dignity. Just on the little side, if you ever want to work on your story, if you ever want to work on storytelling, I will be more than happy and glad and excited to work on your story with you. So let's start with talking about what is the first step on organizing. And the first step, which if you remember from Thursday's call, when I said that you all are going to leave with an idea, with kind of an outline of what you want to do in your campus. And that was actually kind of jumping the gun, or 2 or 3 steps before. What I would always say the first step when you begin to organize is to understand the problem. There it is. To understand the problem. Understand how did this problem come to be? What is the issue? Understand who is truly affected by it. What are they saying? And are they leading? And these are questions that I would say you need to write out and you need to find answers for. Another, three sets of questions. How did this come to be? How did the problem come to be? Second one, who is affected by it? What are they saying? And are they leading? And the third question is, how are you addressing the problem? How are you attempting to solve the problem? And so I studied entrepreneurship. And one of the things in entrepreneurship that I learned that I kind of rightfully took or borrowed into organizing is anytime you're going to start a startup with a new product, you have to spend a dedicated time on figuring out, does the customer want this? Does the customer, would this make sense for the customer? Is this actually what the customer needs or would actually buy? Sometimes when you're organizing, you're selling an idea. You're selling, in a sense, a new vision of a changed world. But your customers are really, I would say, the people that are organizing with you, the people that are supporting you. So what you need to figure out, one is, what is the problem? How does that problem, how did that come to be? So it could be understanding the history of the problem. It could be understanding how did that come to be. It could be saying, okay, what is our campus doing that is welcoming immigrants? What is our campus doing that advocates for immigrant issues? Does our campus know about these policies? Does our campus know about the struggles that undocumented people are facing in this country? And that's why your first question was, what is your campus doing? How is your campus welcoming undocumented students? How is your campus advocating for pro-immigration policies? Those are those first questions of understanding of the reality. And then the most important part is, who is truly affected? You have to make sure that there are people in your coalition, in your group, in your club that are directly affected by the issues that you are organizing on. Because they are going to bring an insight. They're going to answer these questions. Who is truly affected? What are they saying? How did this problem come to be? More and more and more. And remember, as you start to organize, and you will have moments of failures, you will have moments of hiccups and speed bumps, and you will understand the problem more, people who are directly affected will understand it a certain way. Will start to ask questions that will make you think of what are you truly organizing around? How are you truly empowering yourselves and each other? So you must ensure that people directly affected are a part of this. Okay? Now, the steps to solving it. Next slide, please. Okay. So we're going to get right into that. I forgot I didn't add that. But the steps to solving the problem. There are many, many different ways of. Now, what I think you're thinking of is, okay, are we doing a campaign or none of that? From those questions of solving that you just asked yourself, that last question of how are you addressing the problem? What has been attempted? Has it been through different organizing? Has it been through putting a Band-Aid to the problem? By that, you use that as a groundwork to start to work on seeing, okay, how do we tweak that, and how do we continue moving? And especially because once you are able to know when someone did try to attempt to solve the problem, if they did organizing, you learn from their mistake as well. You learn from what were the struggles that prevented them from actually solving the problem. What were the Band-Aids? DACA is a big Band-Aid. And as more as all this craziness with DACA, more of the immigration movements is learning how that Band-Aid is really causing more pain now than good in many cases. So once you kind of create that step, that understanding of how do we start to begin that to solve the problem, and this is also where you start to articulate how a just world looks like, and those steps that you can play. So this is called power mapping, and I believe Miriam maybe spoke about this last Tuesday. So in this power mapping, you all are going to do it. You're going to this is going to be part of your homework for this week. So let me kind of, in case you don't know power mapping, there's two arrows. So the arrow going up, you see more power and less power. Now what that is trying to address is, okay, who in your institution, who are the people that can actually make change, that can actually solve this problem? So let's say you want to start a scholarship at a university. Well, who has the power to make that happen? The president, you could say, has a lot of power and might be the one that has the power, right, to make that happen. Who has the less power? Who is really not going to do much of a change, or doesn't have much of an actual, quote, authority or guidelines? And I also want to make sure that you know that do not always believe that titles are actually what give what would categorize as more power or less power. A lot of times it's the influence that person has in the university, how they're respected, um, and and how many people in the university trust that person to say, yeah, let's go forward with what they're saying. And then that goes into um, the diagonal, which would be our x-axis, right? Who is supportive and who is very resistant. I feel like that's very straightforward. So who is supportive of your cause? Who likes this idea of creating a scholarship for undocumented students in your university? Who is against this? And remember, when Charlie talked about when the letter got leaked, and he had a bunch of emails from faculty and staff, he saw the professors that were supportive of the cause and that were resistant to the cause. And you'll see many different graphs like this, many different power maps that have that would actually categorize supportive and against. Against people, they're always going to be there. But people who are resistant are people who you can move. All right? And so that's why I put that, because I also want you to find those people who are resistant to the idea, but could be persuaded to start moving them a little bit to the supportive side. Now, in the side, when you start mapping these out, when you start putting, okay, who are the people who have most power, and where are they at? Are they in the resistant? Are they in supportive? And you want to give them. I mean, think of it like a graph. Like you have numbers, right? And the farther away they are from resistant and supportive, the more interestingly you're going to figure out, okay, they have this much power, but they're very resistant to us. They have a lot of power, and they're really supportive of us. And then you have a situation where you have people who have less power, but those people are very supportive or very resistant. And those people, especially those who have less power but are very supportive, those are a lot of times for people who are going to be your allies and organizing, who are going to be actually the people that you will be organizing with. And now, the like messed up part about this is that we have to categorize the less power, but that doesn't mean that they have no power. Okay, be very conscious of that, and it's all going to look different. All right. Next slide, please. Okay, so this isn't one of my favorite graphs because this actually starts talking about. Remember how I said the reason why I put resistance, because you can move them into a more supportive way. This graph really talks about how do you slowly start moving the needle, moving the arrow into a place where they will be supportive. And so there's a lot in this, and you will see that through the way of moving that arrow is by different activities, by different actions, by different forms of encounters with folks, by different forms of empowering them, and you'll actually see that on the left side, you see the word empower, and how do you empower those folks is a good way of how do you make them more supportive of your cause. Also, don't worry, I'm going to share this slide in PowerPoint with you all so you all have a chance to see it. All right? So next slide, please. Now, we're going to start talking about different actions that you can take, different activities that you can take. And the reason why I love about this framework right here is because you have it categorizes from awareness. So you have the outcomes on your, that would be your y-axis, if I'm remembering this correctly, awareness, will, and actions. And you will see on here that there are different different strategies. So you have community mobilizing, which is high up on action and is slightly a little bit in public section and the influence section. And they all do different things, and they're all different kind of tools and methods that you can use. Now, remember, there are methods, so they will how that would look like will change. How you execute them will look different depending on the culture, depending on the realities that your school are in. Okay, so it doesn't mean that if you go and you do community mobilizing, or if you do a public forum will look very different if you're doing it at LMU, Loyola Marymount University, which does it, which I feel that is one of the universities that is one of the most welcoming Jesuit universities to immigrants. You will do that very different at LMU than you would do it at Xavier University. And I'm always going to use Xavier because I know that I went there, I organized there, I know that. So it's going to be very different at Xavier because one, Xavier can be a very red campus and not very friendly towards pro-immigration policy. So again, it looks different. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to talk about two big things, which is campaign development versus policy education. And you will see in the graph where they are located. So public education is on the awareness section in the decision makers. And the reason why that is because when you are making these policy makers, sorry, I misspoke, policy educator, they are really towards the people who have the most power. So remember when we're going back to our power mapping, you're going to be looking at the people who have the most power, and you are seeing where are they at. And this is the part where you look at those who are a little bit resistant to your cause, to your vision, and you want to try to move them, move the needle, move them to the supportive side, and help them to understand. Now, this is where I feel that storytelling comes in an important plays an important asset in doing this. The other one is campaign development, and that is will, in the section of will and decision makers. And so, the reason why they're very for me, I think policy education and campaign development are very kind of you do the policy education, policymaker education, and then you do the campaign development, because then you have to kind of push that idea, push the work of that what you're trying to do, pushing them to get that policy into place, to start really thinking about, okay, how do we make the scholarship available, and how do we, in Loyola Chicago, what they did is they all had a camp when they were working on their scholarship for undocumented students. They all allowed for the student body to vote on whether they would add, I forget how many cents, I want to say 20 cents or $1 or something like that, but it was very low margin of number of amount, add to their tuition, and all of that money would go to this bucket of that would be a scholarship fund for undocumented students. And so they I bet you that they had to educate policymakers, people who had that power, to be willing to open and to say, okay, let's do something about it. Let's try to attempt. And then that campaign development, that is where they executed this idea. And before they actually started voting, they had to go out and educate people and push why this was a good idea. And they were successful because they got it passed. Okay? And so this framework is a good framework to help you understand what are the steps and how does the awareness part, because notice that you have awareness and then will and then action. They're on order. And that's why they're also being placed into this. And they're all in this section of decision makers. The decision makers have a big part in this. So next slide, please. Now, here's another one. Public education, leadership development, and coalition building. And notice how they're almost in an angle going through, right? So you have public education. It is in the awareness section with public, in the audience is the public. And so that, a lot of times, like I would say, the reason why, and also the reason why I select these few and policymakers and campaign development is because they complement each other. And they're almost two things that you're doing at the same time to get the work that you're doing, to get whatever you're trying to accomplish past. And so that public education is helping to inform people. At Xavier University, there are a lot of people who don't understand about our broken immigration system. There are a lot of people, at least when I was there, Megan and Mercy and Iris can to talk more about how it currently looks right now. But when I was there, a lot of people didn't know about that they were undocumented Syrian recipients in their schools. And so a lot of it was helping them educate them, helping them understand the work. Because if no one knows that it's a problem, then why would they want to organize around it? And then when you come after that, then you start to build that leadership development. And you'll notice that is on the outcomes, the will section, and kind of in the middle of public and influence. And this is where organizations, groups, clubs really come into play. This is a space where they try to create leaderships, create people who are going to be leading a different part, a different section in the organizing, in the campaign of getting the scholarship passed on your university. And now, lastly, you have coalition building. In coalition building, remember how I said in your power map, you have the section of people who have very low power but are supportive. And a lot of times, when you're doing your power mapping, it's not actually people, it's also offices, clubs, influential student government. And so, how do you work with other partners, other clubs, other offices? How do you all come together to work on the same goal? And coalition building has a lot of power. You might even also encounter, are there other coalitions currently happening? You want to put them on your power map, and they're definitely up in the power section because they have a lot of power. They have a lot of people. When you have a group, a community who's saying we're all going to come together and we're all going to fight for this cause, the people in power, the people who are these, who can make these things happen, they see that, they realize that, they take notice in that, because that can be very dangerous for them in the future. And so when you build your own coalition, when you have different clubs, different offices, all together saying we all want this, we all want a scholarship for undocumented students in our school, presidents, board of trustees, you start to notice that. Okay? So, again, these are methods, these are tools. How you execute them, it's going to look different. And it's all going to look different because you have to spend time understanding the culture, understanding the realities that your school lives in. And by answering the first set of questions in the first weeks gives you an idea. And when you go back to your university, you're going to put the plan that you worked on for this last 3 weeks, you're going to put that down and you're going to talk to people. You're going to talk to classmates, talk to officers, and really spend some time understanding the problem, appreciating the problem. So then you can start to develop a strategy to figure out, okay, once you figure out what is the problem and you know the problem, then you can start working on the strategy, on finding what is the method that we are going to use to get this out the door, to make sure that this becomes a reality in our campus. Again, I cannot teach you organizing in a 41-minute video, but at least I got your feet wet, I got your minds thinking, and in this week's call, for organizers call that we're going to have, we're going to talk a lot about this. And you all are going to try to attempt to work on this, and to try to map out your power map in your school, and to try to figure out what is that, because now that you know that problem, you're going to try to find the power map, see, okay, how do we continue, what is our strategy, what is our method of organizing to get whatever you want to get in your campus through. And don't worry, I'm also going to be right there next to you, helping you out, bringing questions, helping you think outside the box, and even sharing some of my failures that I had as an organizer, organizing college campuses around Cincinnati and at Xavier. And you're also going to have other students who have done this for the last year or even years, and help share what they saw as failures and what they learned from it. Okay? I'm really excited about the work that you all are doing, and I hope you all are too.